You keep trying to manifest. You visualize. You affirm. You script. You do the methods. And the harder you try, the further it gets. You already know this pattern. You have lived it. The effort itself is the block. This is not a motivational problem. This is not about whether you believe hard enough or want it badly enough. This is quantum mechanics, and the reason you are watching this right now, in this exact moment, is because something in you is ready to stop fighting and start functioning the way you were designed to function. There is a version of you that does not try to manifest. It just does, effortlessly, automatically, like breathing. And that version is not some future evolved you. It exists right now, in this moment, operating at a frequency you have been trained to ignore. When that version takes over, when your quantum self moves into the driver's seat, the entire game changes. Manifestation stops being something you do and becomes something you are. And I am going to show you exactly how that transfer happens, why it has not happened yet, and what occurs in your reality the moment it does. But first, you need to understand what has been stopping it. And it is not what you think. You were taught to control, to make things happen, to force outcomes. Every manifestation technique you have ever learned operates from the same assumption, that you, the individual conscious mind, must direct the process, set the intention, hold the vision, maintain the frequency. You are the one doing the work, and in that framework, you are always exhausted, always monitoring, always checking whether it is working. Because if you are the one making it happen, you cannot stop. The moment you stop, it stops, right? That is the trap. That is the entire design of the system you have been operating in. The ego believes it is the manifester. And the ego is correct that it can manifest, but it manifests through effort, through force, through control. And that method works, sometimes, for small things, surface things. But it is slow, it is exhausting, and it has a ceiling. Because the ego is not designed to access the full field, it operates in linear time. It sees separation, it experiences lack. So even when it manifests from lack, which means what it creates always carries that frequency. You get the thing, but it does not feel the way you thought it would. You achieve the goal, but the emptiness is still there. You attract the person, but the connection is not what you imagined. And you think the problem is that you did not do it right. You did not visualize clearly enough. You did not believe hard enough. So you try again, harder this time. More discipline, more focus, more control. And the cycle repeats. You are running on a treadmill, and the treadmill is the belief that you are the one who has to run. But here is what you have been sensing, maybe for a while now, maybe just recently. There are moments when it just happens. No effort. No trying. You think of someone, they text. You need information, it appears. You walk into the right place at the right time without planning it. And in those moments, you are not trying to manifest. You were not holding a vision or maintaining a frequency. You were just existing. And something moved through you. Something that knows how to navigate reality in a way your conscious mind does not. That something is not outside you. It is not a higher power you need to pray to or a universe you need to convince. It is you. A version of you that exists at a different level of the field. Quantum physicists call this the non-local self. Consciousness researchers call it the higher self. But the label does not matter. What matters is that this version of you is not bound by the same rules. It does not experience time the way your ego does. It does not see separation the way your conscious mind does. It exists in the state of already having, already being, already connected to everything you think you are trying to manifest. And when that version takes over, when it moves from the background into the foreground of your experience, manifestation becomes automatic because you are no longer trying to get somewhere. You are already there. The question is not whether you can access this version of yourself. You already do in those spontaneous moments. The question is why it is not always active. Why does it only happen sometimes? Why do you keep defaulting back to effort, to control, to the exhausting loop of trying? And the answer is simpler than you think. But it requires you to let go of the one thing you have been holding on to the hardest. Your need to be the one doing it. The ego does not trust anything it cannot control. It does not trust the quantum self because the quantum self does not operate logically. It does not follow steps. It does not prove itself before it acts. It just knows. And to the ego, that feels dangerous. Because if you are not the one steering, if you are not monitoring every variable, managing every outcome, then how do you know it will work? How do you know you will be safe? How do you know you will not lose everything? So the ego holds on. It keeps trying. It keeps controlling. And every moment it does that, it blocks the quantum self from functioning. Not because the quantum self needs permission, but because you cannot operate from two frequencies at once. You cannot be in the state of trying and the state of being simultaneously. One cancels the other. And as long as you are trying, you are telling the field that you are not already there. Which means the field reflects that back to you. You stay in the frequency of needing, wanting, chasing. And that is what you continue to experience. But when you stop, when the trying ends, when the ego finally exhausts itself or surrenders or just gets quiet for a moment, that is when the quantum self takes over. And it does not take over through effort. It takes over through absence of effort. Through the space created when you stop filling every moment with control. This is not about giving up. This is not about passivity or not taking action. This is about recognizing that there is a version of you that is far more intelligent than your conscious mind, far more connected than your ego, and far more capable of orchestrating reality than any visualization technique you have ever learned. And that version does not need your help. It needs your trust. It needs you to stop interfering. And the moment you do, everything changes. Not because you did something new, but because you stopped doing the thing that was blocking it. You have felt this before. You know the moments I am talking about. The times when you stopped caring about the outcome and it showed up. The times when you let go of the need and it appeared. The times when you were not thinking about it and it happened. Those were not coincidences. Those were not random. Those were moments when the quantum self was allowed to function without the ego shouting over it. And those moments can become your baseline. Not occasional, not rare, not something that only happens when you are not paying attention. Constant, automatic, natural, but only if you understand what is actually happening in those moments and how to stop blocking it the rest of the time. Because the quantum self is not something you need to activate. It is already active. It is always running in the background. The question is whether you are letting it drive or whether you keep grabbing the wheel every 5 seconds because you do not trust where it is going. And here is the part that makes this difficult. The ego does not just surrender because you tell it to. It does not let go because you understand the concept. It lets go when it has proof, when it sees evidence that the quantum self can actually deliver. But it cannot see that evidence if it never lets the quantum self function long enough to create it. So you are stuck in a loop. The ego needs proof before it trusts. But it will not get proof until it trusts. That is the test. That is the edge every person who reaches this level of understanding has to cross. You already know manifestation works. You have seen it happen in your life. But you have not yet made the full transfer. You are still trying to do it yourself most of the time. And occasionally, when you forget to try, the quantum self slips through and reminds you what is possible. But you are not living from that place consistently. And that is what this is about. Not learning a new method, not getting better at visualizing, not fixing your limiting beliefs, but making the transfer permanent, letting the quantum self take over completely, and staying out of its way. And I know what that feels like, because I spent years doing it wrong. Years trying to force outcomes while simultaneously reading about surrender. Years visualizing while feeling the exhaustion of holding the vision. Years knowing there was another way, but not being able to stop the doing long enough to let it happen. So I understand the resistance. I understand why, even after hearing this, part of you will still try to make it happen. Because letting go feels like losing control, and losing control feels like nothing will happen. But here is what actually occurs when you stop trying. And I do not mean stop caring. I do not mean give up on what you want. I mean stop the specific action of trying to manifest it. Stop the mental effort of holding the frequency, maintaining the vision, checking whether it is working. When that stops, there is a moment of silence. And in that silence, the quantum self does not wait for permission. It just starts functioning. Because it was always functioning. You were just drowning it out with noise. And what it does in that silence is not random. It is not hoping something good happens. The quantum self operates from a completely different physics than the ego does. While your conscious mind experiences reality as solid, fixed, already determined, the quantum self experiences it as probability fields, infinite potential states that collapse into specific outcomes based on observation. And this is not metaphor. This is measurable. Quantum physicists have demonstrated for over a century that at the subatomic level, particles exist in superposition, multiple states simultaneously until they are observed. The act of observation collapses the wave function into a single outcome, and observation in quantum mechanics is not passive. It is participatory. The observer is part of the system. Consciousness itself influences which outcome manifests. Your ego observes reality through the filter of past evidence, current circumstances, logical probability. It looks at what is and projects forward based on what has been. So when it observes, it collapses probability into outcomes that match that filter. Same patterns, same results, different details, same structure, and it does not understand why. It thinks it is trying new things. It is using new methods, but it is observing from the same frequency, which means it keeps collapsing the same reality. The quantum self does not observe through that filter. It observes from the state of already having, not as a mental trick, not as positive thinking, but as its actual frequency. It exists in the field where the thing you want is not future or separate, or maybe it is now. It is here. It is done. And when it observes from that state, it collapses probability into outcomes that match that frequency. Not through effort, through resonance. The field responds to what you are, not what you want. And the quantum self is already the thing, so the field reflects that. This is why those spontaneous manifestations happen. The ones where you were not trying. You were not in wanting mode. You were just existing. And for a moment, the quantum self was observing without the ego filtering it. And reality shifted. Instantly, effortlessly. Exactly what was needed appeared exactly when it was needed. And you probably called it a coincidence, or luck, or good timing, but it was not. It was the quantum self doing what it always does when you are not blocking it with trying. And you have experienced this more than you realize. Think about the times information found you right when you needed it. You were not searching. You were not asking. You were just present. And someone said something. Or you saw something. Or you suddenly remembered something. And it was exactly the answer. Exactly the piece you needed. That was not the universe being nice. That was the quantum self navigating the information field and collapsing the exact data point required in that moment. It does that constantly. In the background, while you are worried about whether you are manifesting correctly, or the times you walked into a room and met the exact person who would change your trajectory. You were not networking. You were not trying to meet anyone. You were just there. And so were they. And the conversation happened. And 6 months later, you look back and realize that moment was the pivot point. That was not chance. That was the quantum self orchestrating synchronicity. It does not experience people as separate. It experiences them as nodes in the same field. And it knows how to move you into alignment with the nodes that carry what you need. Not through strategy, through coherence. You resonate at a frequency, and the field moves you toward matching frequencies. Automatic, effortless, precise. But your ego does not trust that. Because it cannot track it cannot measure it cannot take credit for it, so it dismisses it and goes back to trying, back to controlling, back to doing the manifestation work that feels productive, but keeps you in the loop of effort and exhaustion. And the exhaustion itself is the signal. When manifestation feels hard, when it drains you, when you need discipline to maintain it, you are operating from ego. The quantum self does not experience effort. It experiences flow. It does not hold frequencies. It is frequencies. And being a frequency requires no energy. You do not work to be yourself. You just are. And when the quantum self is in charge, manifestation has that same quality. You are not doing it. It is happening through you, as you, because you are already vibrating at the outcome. And this is where most teachings get it wrong. They tell you to raise your vibration, to match the frequency of what you want. And they give you tools to do that. Gratitude practices, visualization techniques, affirmations. And those tools work to a degree. They shift your state temporarily, but they are still ego-driven. They are still you trying to become something you are not yet, which reinforces the gap. The quantum self does not raise its vibration to match the desire. It already is the vibration. There is no gap, no journey, no process of becoming. It exists in the state of having. And when you stop trying to get there and recognize you already are there, the shift happens, not as a result of doing something right, as a result of stopping the thing that was wrong. And stopping that thing is not a one-time decision. It is a moment-to-moment recognition. Because as the ego will come back, it will try to help. It will see progress and want to accelerate it. It will see delay and want to fix it. It will see contrast and want to control the response. And every time it does, you have a choice. Let it drive. Or remember who is actually capable of navigating this. I am going to give you something to practice right now. Not a manifestation technique, a pattern interrupt, something that breaks the loop of trying and drops you into the frequency of the quantum self for 30 seconds. That is all. 30 seconds. But in those 30 seconds, you will feel the difference. And once you feel it, you can recognize it. And once you recognize it, you can choose it more often, until it becomes your baseline. Here is the practice. Close your eyes, take a breath, and instead of visualizing what you want or affirming that it is coming, ask yourself this question. What if I already have it and I just forgot? Not as a belief you need to convince yourself of. As a genuine inquiry. What if the thing you think you are trying to manifest is already present in your field, already accessible? And the only reason you are not experiencing it is because you are looking for it in the future, instead of recognizing it now. Sit with that question. Do not answer it. Do not figure it out. Just let it be there. And notice what happens in your body. Notice the softening, the release, the subtle shift from reaching to resting. That is not you doing something. That is the quantum self coming online. That is what it feels like when the trying stops and the being begins. Stay there for 30 seconds. Then open your eyes. That is it. That is the frequency. You do not need to maintain it. You do not need to hold it. You just need to recognize it. Because once you know what it feels like, you will notice when you are not in it. And noticing is enough. You do not fix it. You do not try to get back to it. You just notice. And in the noticing, the trying stops. And in the stopping, the quantum self takes over again. Automatic. Now let me tell you what happened to me that made this real. Not theoretical, not conceptual. Real. I had a friend. We were close in our 20s. Life pulled us in different directions. 10 years passed. No contact, no communication. I did not think about him often. But one afternoon, I was sitting in my car after a meeting, and his face just appeared in my mind. Clear, specific, and I felt this pull to reach out. But I did not, because what would I even say after 10 years? Hey, I was just thinking about you. It felt random, so I let it go. Moved on with my day. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed. Message from him. First contact in a decade. He said he had been thinking about me and felt like he needed to share something. He sent me an article about a research project I had been trying to figure out for months. The exact piece of information I needed. The thing I had been searching for and could not find. He had no idea I was working on that. He just felt compelled to send it. That moment changed everything. Not because it was magical, because it showed me the mechanism. I had not been trying to manifest that information. I had not been visualizing finding it. I had actually stopped looking for it that week because I was exhausted from searching. And in that stopping, something else took over. My quantum self knew I needed that information. It also knew my friend had it. And it orchestrated a synchronicity that brought us both to the same thought at the same time, separated by geography, but connected through the field. He felt the pull to reach out. I felt the pull to think of him. Neither of us was trying to make anything happen. We were just responding to a frequency we did not consciously recognize, but our quantum selves absolutely did. And when I realized what had actually occurred, when I stopped calling it coincidence and started seeing it as function, I had to ask myself, how many times has this been happening without me noticing? How many times has the quantum self been orchestrating reality while I was busy trying to do it myself? And the answer was, constantly. It is always orchestrating, always moving pieces, always collapsing probability into the exact outcomes that serve your highest alignment. But most of the time, you are too busy forcing your own agenda to notice. Too busy trying to make the wrong thing happen through effort to see that the right thing is already being delivered through flow. And that is the transfer. That is the moment when manifestation stops being work and becomes recognition. You are not making things happen. You are noticing what is already happening. You are not creating synchronicity. You are paying attention to the synchronicity that is always present. And the more you notice, the more it amplifies. Because your attention is observation. And observation collapses probability. So when you start observing the quantum self in action, instead of observing the lack of what you want, you collapse more of that. More synchronicity, more flow, more automatic alignment. This is not faith. This is physics. You are shifting what you are measuring. And in quantum mechanics, what you measure determines what manifests. Your ego measures lack, measures delay, measures evidence that it is not working. So it collapses more of that. Your quantum self measures coherence, measures resonance, measures the field responding. So it collapses more of that. Same field, different observation point, different results. And here is what most people miss. You think the goal is to get better at observing from the quantum self, to train yourself to hold that frequency longer, to build the skill of letting go. But that is still ego thinking. The quantum self does not need training. It is already perfect at what it does. What needs to happen is simpler. The ego needs to stop interrupting. And it stops interrupting not through discipline, but through trust. And it develops trust not through belief, but through evidence. And the evidence comes from letting it function long enough to show you what it can do. Which brings us to the protocol, the actual process of making this transfer permanent. And I need to be clear about something before I give this to you. This is not a technique you add to your manifestation routine. This is a complete replacement of how you relate to reality. If you try to do this while also doing affirmations and visualizations and scripting, you will just create more noise, because those methods operate from the assumption that you need to become something you are not yet. And this operates from the recognition that you already are. Those two frequencies cannot coexist. You cannot simultaneously try to get somewhere and recognize you are already there. One cancels the other. So this is not an addition. This is a substitution. You stop the old system completely, and you start functioning from this one. And in the beginning, it will feel like you are doing nothing. Because from the ego's perspective, you are. But from the quantum self's perspective, you are finally getting out of the way and letting it work. Here is how it functions. 3 shifts, not steps, shifts, because steps imply sequence and effort. Shifts imply recognition and reorientation. You are not building something new. You are remembering something that was always true. Shift 1. Stop asking how. The ego loves how. How will it happen? How will I get there? How does this work? And every time you ask how, you pull yourself out of the quantum field and back into linear time. Because how is a question that assumes separation between where you are and where you want to be. It assumes a path, a process, a gap that needs to be crossed. And as long as you are focused on the gap, you are observing lack, which means you collapse lack. The quantum self does not ask how. It does not need a path because it does not experience distance. It exists in the state of already there. And when you stop asking how and start resting in the eyes, the field reorganizes around that frequency. Not because you figured out the path, because you stopped needing one. This does not mean you stop taking action. It means you stop taking action from the energy of figuring out how to get there. You take action from the energy of already being there. And those two energies produce completely different actions. One is forced, effortful, strategic. The other is intuitive, natural, obvious. You do not have to think about it. You just move. And the movement feels easy, because it is not trying to create something. It is expressing something that already is. Shift 2. Stop checking. The ego checks constantly. Is it working? Is it here yet? Did I do it right? Am I in the right frequency? And every check is a measurement. And every measurement collapses the wave function. And if you are checking from a place of doubt, from a need to know if it is working, you are measuring lack, which means you collapse lack over and over. You are actively creating the delay you are trying to avoid. The quantum self does not check. It knows, and knowing is not intellectual. It is not belief. It is a felt sense of already having. You do not check whether you have lungs. You just breathe. And when the quantum self is driving, manifestation has that same quality. You do not monitor whether it is working. You just live from the frequency of it being done. And here is the part that challenges everyone. Stopping the checking feels like you are not paying attention. Like you are being irresponsible. Like maybe if you do not monitor it, it will not happen. But that is the ego talking. That is the voice that thinks it is in charge. And as long as you listen to that voice, you stay in the loop. The quantum self does not need your monitoring. It needs your trust. And trust is not hoping it works. Trust is functioning as if it already has. And functioning that way is not pretending. It is recognizing. Because at the quantum level, it already has. The outcome already exists in the field as a probability. Your job is not to create it. Your job is to stop collapsing the probability that it has not. Shift 3. Stop defending your current reality. This is the subtlest and the most powerful. The ego defends what is. It explains why things are the way they are. It justifies current circumstances. It builds narratives around lack. And every time you do that, every time you explain why you do not have it yet, why it has not happened, why it is taking so long, you are affirming the frequency of not having. You are observing lack, and observation locks in reality. Scientists call this quantum Zeno effect. Continuous observation of a quantum state prevents it from evolving. If you keep measuring the particle in state A, it stays in state A. It cannot transition to state B because your observation keeps collapsing it back to A. And that is what you do when you defend your current reality. You keep observing it, explaining it, talking about it, and it stays. The quantum self does not defend what is. It does not need to explain delay or justify circumstances. It just operates from what is true at the quantum level. And what is true at the quantum level is that multiple realities exist simultaneously. The one you are experiencing is not the only one. It is just the one you are observing most consistently. And the moment you stop defending it, stop explaining it, stop giving it your attention, it loses coherence. And the other reality, the one where you already have what you want, starts gaining coherence. Not because you made it happen, because you stopped preventing it. This does not mean you lie about your circumstances or pretend things are different than they are. It means you stop giving current reality explanatory power. You stop treating it as fixed. You stop building identity around it. Someone asks how you are doing, you do not need to catalog everything that is not working. You just respond from the version of you that is already where you want to be. Not fake, not performing. Actually embodying that frequency in the moment of the question. And every time you do that, you are collapsing probability in that direction. You are training the field to reflect that version instead of the old one. And these three shifts, when they become your baseline, create a cascade. The quantum self starts driving more often. Synchronicities increase. Information appears. People show up. Opportunities open. And it does not feel like manifestation. It feels like life suddenly clicking into place. Like reality cooperating instead of resisting. Like you are finally moving with the current instead of against it. And you are. Because you stopped trying to control the river and started letting it carry you. But here is what will happen. And you need to be ready for this. The old patterns will fight back. Not because they are trying to sabotage you. Because they are trying to keep you safe. Your ego has spent years, maybe decades, learning to survive through control. Through effort. Through figuring things out. And now you are asking it to let go, to trust something it cannot see or measure or predict. And it is going to panic. It is going to tell you this is not working. It is going to tell you that you need to do more, try harder, fix something. And in those moments, you will feel the pull to go back to the old way, to start checking, to start forcing, to start defending why it has not happened yet. And that pull is the test. That is the moment when you find out if you are actually ready for this, or if you are just interested in the idea of it. Because resisting that pull, staying in the new frequency, when everything in you wants to go back to control, that is not comfortable. It feels like free fall. It feels like nothing is happening. It feels like you are being irresponsible. And your mind will give you very logical reasons why you need to intervene, why you need to take charge, why you need to do something. But here is what is actually happening in those moments. The quantum self is reorganizing your reality. It is collapsing probability into new configurations. It is orchestrating synchronicities that have not landed yet. And that process does not look like progress to the ego, because the ego measures progress in visible results, in things changing on the surface. But quantum shifts happen in the field first. The particles reorganize before the wave collapses. The frequency shifts before the form reflects it. And if you panic during that gap, if you go back to forcing because you do not see evidence fast enough, you interrupt the process. You pull yourself out of the quantum field and back into linear time. and you have to start over. This is why most people never make the full transfer. They touch the frequency, they feel it working, they see the first signs of synchronicity, and then they get impatient or scared, or they need proof faster, and they go back to doing it the old way. And the moment they do, the quantum self steps back, not because it gave up, because you are blocking it again. You cannot drive and be a passenger simultaneously. One or the other. And every time you grab the wheel, you are choosing effort over flow, control over trust, ego over quantum self. And I am not saying this to make you wrong. I am saying it so you recognize the pattern when it shows up. Because it will show up multiple times, and each time it does, you have a choice. And the choice is not about being strong enough to resist the pull. The choice is about recognizing that the pull itself is evidence that the quantum self is working. The ego only panics when something real is shifting. When nothing is changing, it stays quiet. It has no reason to fight. But when the field starts reorganizing, when your reality is actually in transition, the ego senses it, and it reacts. It tries to regain control because it thinks it is losing ground. But it is not losing ground, it is losing dominance, and that is exactly what needs to happen. So when you feel that pull, when you feel the urge to check or force or fix, do not resist it. Just recognize it. Oh, there is the ego trying to help. And then choose differently. Not through willpower, through remembering. You already know what the quantum self can do. You have seen it work. You have evidence. The friend who messaged you out of nowhere with exactly what you needed. The information that appeared at the exact moment. The opportunity that opened without you pushing. That was not luck. That was the quantum self functioning. And it will keep functioning if you let it. But you have to stop interrupting every time it does not show you proof on your timeline. The timeline itself is the issue. The ego wants results now, today, this week. It measures delay and calls it failure. But the quantum self does not operate in linear time. It moves through probability fields. It collapses outcomes when all variables align. And alignment is not something you force. It is something you allow. You cannot rush coherence. You can only maintain the frequency and trust that the field is responding. And it is. Always. Every single moment you are in that frequency, the field is reorganizing around it. You just cannot see it yet, because you are still looking for proof in the old places. You are checking the surface while the shift is happening in the foundation. And the shift in the foundation is not subtle. You will feel it. Not as visible results, as internal change. You will notice yourself not caring about things that used to consume you. You will notice old triggers not landing the same way. You will notice your responses shifting without effort. You will notice yourself making different choices without thinking about it. That is not you trying to be better. That is the quantum self rewriting your default settings. And when your defaults change, your reality follows. Because reality is not happening to you. It is happening from you. And when what you are changes, what you experience changes. But none of that happens if you keep checking for proof that it is working. Because checking is measuring. And if you are measuring from doubt, you collapse doubt. If you are measuring from trust, you collapse trust. And trust does not mean hoping it works. Trust means functioning as if it already has. And that is a completely different frequency than hoping. So here is what you do when the pull to go back shows up. when the ego starts panicking, when you feel like you need to do something or everything will fall apart. You pause, you breathe, and you ask yourself one question. Am I observing from lack or from having? That is it. Not what should I do? Not how do I fix this? Just, am I observing from lack or from having? And if the answer is lack, you do not try to shift to having. You just notice. Because noticing is enough. The moment you see that you are observing lack, the observation changes. It becomes awareness of the observation rather than the observation itself. And in that awareness, the grip loosens. The quantum self has space again, and it takes over. Automatic. And the more you do that, the more the transfer becomes permanent. Because you are not fighting the ego. You are just choosing a different observation point. And over time, that observation point becomes your baseline. You stop defaulting to lack. You stop measuring delay. You stop defending current reality. And you start functioning from the frequency of already having. Not as a practice, as your natural state. And when that becomes natural, manifestation is not something you do anymore. It is just what happens when you exist, automatic, effortless, inevitable. And that version of you, that version where the quantum self is driving full time, is not some distant future state. It is available right now, in this moment. The only thing between you and that version is the belief that you need to get there. You do not. You just need to stop leaving. Stop choosing the old frequency because it feels familiar. Stop going back to effort because trust feels too risky. The quantum self is already here, already functioning, already orchestrating. You just need to stop blocking it with trying. And I know some of you are watching this and thinking, okay, I understand the concept, but how do I actually live this? How do I stop checking when my bills are due and nothing has changed? How do I trust when I can see the evidence that it is not working? And that question itself is the trap, because you are still looking for a method, a technique, a way to do this. And this is not a doing. This is a being you do not learn to be. You just stop pretending you are something else. You are not someone who needs to manifest abundance. You are abundance observing itself through temporary lack. You are not someone who needs to attract the right relationship. You are connection experiencing itself through temporary separation. You are not someone who needs to heal. You are wholeness exploring itself through temporary fragmentation. And the moment you stop identifying with the temporary and recognize the permanent, the temporary dissolves. Not because you fixed it, because you stopped giving it reality. And this is where I need to ask you something. If any part of what I just said resonated, if you felt even a flicker of recognition, if something in you knows this is true, even if your mind does not fully understand it yet, I want you to leave one word in the comments. Ready. That is it. Just the word ready. Not because I need engagement, not because it helps the algorithm, though it does, but because saying that word, typing it, committing it to the field, is an act of observation. You are collapsing probability in the direction of readiness. You are signaling to the quantum field that you are no longer interested in trying. You are ready to let the quantum self take over. And that signal matters. It creates coherence. It aligns frequency. It is not symbolic. It is functional. So if you are actually ready, say it. One word, ready. And if you want to keep moving in this direction, if you want to continue learning how to function from this frequency, instead of just understanding it intellectually, then subscribe. Not because you want more content, because you are choosing a different network. You are aligning with a field of people who are done with effort and ready for flow. And that alignment amplifies everything. You do not manifest alone. You manifest through coherence with the field. And the field you align with determines what you collapse. So choose the field that operates from quantum principles. Choose the network that understands this physics. Subscribe. Turn on notifications. Because what is coming next will show you things about reality that most people never see. And you will want to be here when it drops. Because here is what happens next. Once the quantum self takes over, once that transfer becomes permanent, you do not just manifest differently. You become different. And I do not mean that metaphorically. I mean at the identity level. The person who was trying to manifest stops existing. Not because you killed the ego, but because the structure that was built around effort and control dissolves when it is no longer needed. And what remains is something the ego never understood. You stop being someone who wants things, and you become someone who has access. Constant, continuous, automatic, and that shift in identity changes everything. Because identity determines perception, and perception determines what you collapse from the field. When you identified as someone who needs to manifest, you perceived lack. You saw what was missing. You measured gaps, and that perception locked you into a frequency where those gaps were real. But when your identity shifts to someone who has access, your perception shifts. You stop seeing what is missing. You start seeing what is available. And availability is not future. It is now. It is here. It exists in the field as potential, and your observation collapses it into experience. And the wild part is that this does not feel like you got better at manifesting. It feels like reality got easier, like life started cooperating, like the universe suddenly remembered you exist and started paying attention. But the universe was always paying attention. It was always responding. You were just observing from a frequency that told it you were not ready. And now you are observing from a frequency that says you are. And it responds to that. Instantly. Completely. Without question. This is not faith. This is not spirituality. This is mechanics. The field responds to frequency. Always. Perfectly. Without bias. It does not care what you believe. It does not care what you want. It reflects what you are. And when what you are shifts from someone trying to become to someone who already is, the reflection shifts. Not over time. Immediately. Because at the quantum level, time does not exist the way you experience it. Past, present, and future are simultaneous. The version of you that has everything you want is not waiting in the future. It exists right now in a parallel probability. And the only thing keeping you from experiencing that version is the observation point you are choosing. You are observing this version, the one that does not have it yet. And as long as you keep observing this version, this is what you experience. But the moment you shift your observation to the version that already has it, the field reorganizes, and you start experiencing that reality instead. And that reorganization is not slow. It is instantaneous at the quantum level. But it takes time to reflect in the physical, because physical reality has momentum. It has inertia. Things that are already in motion continue moving until new information enters the system. And your observation is new information. It changes the trajectory. But the ship does not turn on a dime. It turns gradually, And during that turning, it looks like nothing is happening. But everything is happening. The entire field is recalibrating. Probabilities are collapsing differently. Synchronicities are being orchestrated. People are being moved into position. Information is being routed. Opportunities are being aligned. And none of that is visible yet. But it is real. It is happening. And it will become visible the moment you stop checking whether it is. Because the checking interrupts the turning. Every time you measure progress, you lock in the current position. Quantum Zeno effect. Continuous observation prevents evolution. So the ship starts turning, and you check, and the checking freezes it. And then you think it is not working. So you try something else, and the ship starts turning in a different direction, and you check again, and it freezes again, and you spend years doing this, starting the turn, checking, freezing, starting again, checking, freezing, never staying in the observation long enough for the turn to complete. And then you wonder why manifestation takes so long. It does not take long. You just keep interrupting it. And the solution is not to stop caring about the outcome. It is not to detach or give up or pretend you do not want it. The solution is to observe from the state of already having it, and keep observing from that state without checking whether it is true. Because at the quantum level, it already is true, and your job is not to make it true. Your job is to stop collapsing the probability that it is not. And this brings us to something most people never talk about. The reason you keep checking. The reason you cannot just trust and let it happen. It is not because you do not understand the process. It is because part of you does not actually want it to be this easy. Part of you believes that if it is easy, it does not count. If you did not struggle for it, you did not earn it. If you did not suffer, you do not deserve it. And that belief is so deep, so embedded in your conditioning, that you do not even recognize it is there. But it is. And it sabotages every attempt to let the quantum self take over. Because the quantum self makes it easy, automatic, effortless, and your conditioning says that is not how it works. That is not how valuable things come. So you create resistance, you create obstacles, you create reasons why it has to be hard. Because hard confirms the story. Hard proves you are doing it right. Hard means you are worthy of receiving. But the quantum self does not operate from that story. It does not believe in earning or deserving or proving. It just functions. It collapses probability based on frequency. And frequency has nothing to do with effort. You do not earn a frequency. You embody it. And embodiment is not hard. It is recognition. You already are the frequency of everything you want. You are just observing yourself as something else. And the moment you stop observing yourself as something else, the frequency you already are becomes the frequency you experience. And reality reflects that. Automatic. And if there is any part of you that just relaxed reading that, any part that felt relief, that felt permission, that felt like maybe you do not have to keep fighting, that is the quantum self recognizing itself. That is the part of you that has been waiting for you to stop trying so it can finally do what it does. And that part does not need more information. It does not need another technique. It does not need you to figure anything out. It just needs you to get out of the way. And getting out of the way is not a process. It is a decision. Right now, in this moment, you decide whether you are going to keep trying to manifest, or whether you are going to let the quantum self take over. one or the other. And the decision is not hard, it is just unfamiliar, because you have been trying for so long that stopping feels wrong. But stopping is not giving up. Stopping is letting go. And letting go is not passive. It is the most active thing you can do, because it takes everything in you to resist the urge to control, to trust something you cannot see, to function from a frequency your egos cannot confirm. But that is the edge. That is the place where transformation actually happens. Not in the knowing, not in the understanding, in the doing, or more accurately, in the not doing, in the stopping of the thing that was blocking it. And the moment you stop, the quantum self takes over. And you will know it happened, not because you see results immediately, because you feel different, lighter, calmer, like pressure just released, like you can finally breathe. And that feeling is not relief that you are done trying. It is recognition that you never had to try in the first place. And here is what I want you to take from this. Everything you have been trying to manifest, every outcome you have been chasing, every reality you have been trying to create, already exists, not as potential, not as possibility, as actuality, in the quantum field, right now. And the only reason you are not experiencing it is because you are observing from the wrong frequency. You are looking at the version of reality where you do not have it. And as long as you keep looking at that version, that is what you will experience. But the moment you shift your observation to the version where you already have it, the field responds. It collapses that probability. And your experience shifts, not because you made it happen, because you stopped preventing it. And that shift is not something you do once and forget. It is something you choose moment to moment. Every time the ego tries to take over, every time you feel the pull to check or force or fix, every time you notice yourself defending current reality, or asking how, or measuring progress, in those moments, you choose ego or quantum self, trying or being, lack or having. And the more you choose quantum self, the more it becomes your baseline. Until one day you realize you are not choosing anymore. You are just functioning from that frequency naturally. And manifestation is not something you think about. It is just what happens when you exist. And that is when you will look back at this moment, at this video, at this exact point in your journey. And you will realize this was not random. You did not stumble across this by accident. Your quantum self brought you here because you were ready. Ready to stop trying, ready to let go, ready to let the version of you that actually knows how to navigate reality take over. And it has been waiting, patiently, quietly, for you to stop drowning it out with noise. And now you know it is there. Now you know what it feels like. Now you know what happens when you let it drive. So the question is not whether you can do this. You already are doing it. Every time synchronicity happens, every time information finds you, every time something clicks into place without effort. That is the quantum self functioning. The question is whether you are going to keep interrupting it, or whether you are going to let it run full time. And that decision determines everything. Not what you get, but who you become. Not what you manifest, but how you exist. And what comes next is something most people never reach, because they stop here. They understand the quantum self. They feel the frequency. They see it working. And then they go back to life and forget. They let the old patterns take over. They get distracted. They lose coherence. And they spend years bouncing between effort and flow, without ever fully committing to one. But there is another level, a place where the quantum self does not just take over sometimes. It becomes your only operating system, where you do not have an ego self and a quantum self. You just have self, unified, coherent, functioning from one frequency all the time. And at that level, reality does not just cooperate. It bends, it warps, it reorganizes around you, so completely that other people notice. They ask what changed. They feel different around you. They cannot explain it, but they know something is different. And what is different is that you stopped being a node of resistance in the field. You became a node of coherence. And coherence does not just attract what you want, it restructures what is possible. And I am going to show you how that works, how coherence at that level operates, what happens when you stop manifesting individual outcomes and start collapsing entire timelines. But not today. That is coming. And you will want to be here when it does, because what I am about to reveal will change not just how you manifest, but how you understand reality itself. There is a reason some people seem to live in a different reality than everyone else. A reason their lives look effortless while others are grinding. A reason synchronicity follows them everywhere while others beg for signs. And it is not luck. It is not privilege. It is not genetics or upbringing or cosmic favoritism. It is coherence. They found the frequency where the quantum self drives full-time. And once you find that frequency, once you stabilize in it, you do not just change your life. You change which life you are living, which timeline you are experiencing, which version of reality you are collapsing moment to moment. And most people never get there because they think the goal is to manifest better, to get better results, to attract bigger things. But that is still ego thinking. The quantum self is not interested in bigger. It is interested in true. It does not manifest what you want. It manifests what you are. And when what you are shifts to pure coherence, to unified frequency, to quantum self-operating without interference, you stop attracting outcomes. You start collapsing realities, entire probable timelines that were always there, but inaccessible because your frequency was not compatible. And when those timelines become accessible, when you can shift between them consciously, deliberately, naturally, you realize manifestation was never the goal. It was just training wheels. The real ability is reality navigation. And that is what is coming next. But you have to stabilize here first. You have to let the quantum self take over completely. You have to stop interrupting it with trying. Because if you cannot let it drive in this timeline, you will not be able to navigate between timelines. If you cannot trust it to manifest one outcome, you will not be able to trust it to collapse an entire reality. This is the foundation. And everything that comes after this requires that this part is solid, not perfect, solid. Which means the quantum self is your baseline most of the time. Which means effort is the exception, not the rule. Which means you have stopped defending current reality and started functioning from the reality you want to experience. And if you are there, if you have made that transfer, you already know what I am talking about. You can feel the next level waiting. You can sense that there is more, and there is, so much more, but it does not come from seeking. It comes from stabilizing, from letting the quantum self run long enough that it becomes the only self. And when that happens, when the integration is complete, What becomes possible will redefine everything you thought you knew about how reality works. So stay here. Stay in this frequency. Do not go back to trying just because it feels safer. Do not check just because your mind needs proof. Do not defend current reality just because it is what everyone else is doing. Let the quantum self take over. Completely. Permanently. And watch what happens when you stop being the person who tries to manifest and become the person who just exists at the frequency of having. That version of you does not need videos like this. That version does not need techniques or methods or protocols. That version just lives, and reality responds. Automatic, effortless, inevitable. And that is where you are going. Not someday. Now, the moment you stop trying, the moment you let go, the moment you trust that the quantum self knows what it is doing and has always known. That moment is the moment everything changes. Not in the future, right now, in this exact second. You can choose it. You can stop reading this as information and start experiencing it as transmission. You can feel the frequency I am speaking from, and you can match it. Not by trying, by recognizing you already are it. You are just observing yourself as something else. So observe differently. Right now, not the version that does not have it yet, the version that already does. And stay there. Do not check. Do not measure. Do not defend. Just be there, and let the field reorganize around that observation. It will. It is already starting. You can feel it. That subtle shift, that slight relaxation, that quiet knowing that maybe, just maybe, you do not have to keep fighting anymore. That is not hope. That is recognition. The quantum self seeing itself. Finally, after all this time of you looking everywhere else for the answer, it was never out there. It was always right here, waiting for you to stop searching and start being. You are not who you think you are, and the version of you that knows that is not waiting for you to remember. It is remembering you, right now. Through these words, through this frequency, through the coherence that brought you here. You were always going to watch this, at this exact moment, because the quantum self does not leave anything to chance. It orchestrated this, just like it orchestrates everything. And now you know. Now you can stop pretending you are separate from it. Stop pretending you need to become it. You already are it. You just forgot. And forgetting is over. Remembering is now. And what you remember changes everything.